All right, so I have a unique situation here where when I hung this piece of drywall, I cut a hole for an outlet down here. I misaligned it, so I flipped the piece of drywall over, and now I have a hole up here that I need to patch. And if you take a closer look, it's a little uneven where there's a gap behind the drywall and then there's some plaster. Either way, let's get this patched up and I'll show you how I do it. All right, to get started, I'm going to put something behind the drywall here so I can drive in a few screws. Because it's, as you can see, it's loose. I need to put a couple fasteners nearby. So I'm gonna screw this in using something like this where it keeps the screw from going in too far and damaging the drywall. You don't wanna rip the paper when you drive these in. It helps to drill into these pieces of lath here because I don't know where the stud is. The stud could be here, here, here. I just don't know. So if you have lath, that's great. Just drill it right into that. All right, so that looks pretty good. Let's move on. All right, so we are looking at about 2.5 inches wide by 3.5 inches tall. Here is a scrap piece of drywall I'm gonna use as the patch. You wanna try to match the thickness of the drywall that is in the wall. If there's nothing behind it, it's an open cavity, there's no stud or like I have plaster. The thickness doesn't really matter, but either way, just try to match it the best you can. So this is ideally the size you want. And to measure this out, the opening, you wanna try to center it. So we were at 3.5 by 2.5. All right, so let's try to make this as close to the opening as we can. All right, I think that looks pretty good. So what we do from here is just do a little bit of this and a little bit of this. And then snap the board on all planes that you just cut. All right, so it should look something like this. Doesn't have to be perfect. What we do from here is you want to separate these offcuts from the paper. So leave the center block, and now you should have a patch that looks a little something like this. So let's get this on the wall. This square that's left over, we're just gonna put it right into the hole. All right, make sure it fits. And then let's trim up some of this paper. We don't need this much. All right, that looks nice. So let's put some mud in there. So the mud I'm gonna be using for this is called Dust Control. You can also use the green lid, that's called All Purpose. Just make sure you water this down to thin it out. The consistency you're looking for is kind of like a little thinner than peanut butter. Something like that. There's not really a scientific approach to this. Just get it thinned out, and you cannot have too much because whatever spills out of the sides, we could just put right back in the bucket. So that is plenty to work with. So let's get this on the wall. So I'm gonna pre-fill this just a little bit, just so that some of this wood and this plaster doesn't soak all the moisture out of there. And that. All right, that'll work for now. All right, so to place this in there, just line it up and press it down. So we're gonna have a bit of spill out on this because I loaded this up as much as I could. Just make sure you have something to catch the mud as it falls out. All right, so that looks pretty good. I'm gonna let this set up for about 2 hours and come back and see how it's looking. A little bit of a tip. You wanna grab the bag that you probably bought it in, or another plastic bag, and store it like that. And you know, hit that with a hammer, really get it tight, and that'll last a lot longer. So there you go. All right, so I'm gonna be using all-purpose for this just because I ran out of the other stuff. This is watered down as well to the same consistency, a little thinner than peanut butter, just so I can get it really thin in some spots. But the blue lid or the green lid, both of them work just as well, as long as you water them down. If you have one of these, great. If not, you can just scoop it right out of the bucket, which is pretty much what I'm gonna do, just to show you that you don't necessarily need one of these. Ideally, the wider the knife, the better. I realized you probably don't have one of these. If you do, awesome. You can get much better feathering with one of these, but just as long as you have something around 6 inches or more, that'll work just fine. All right, so I'm gonna just get started just getting some of this mud on the wall. It's best place to start. So it doesn't have to be perfect since we're gonna be using a wider knife to get this fanned out a little bit more. This is where it really comes in handy if you water this stuff down, because all-purpose right out of the bucket is not gonna get you as thin as you'd like. You're really gonna be struggling with those bubbles and other stuff. All right, so when you go to feather it, you wanna press down on the one corner so that goes as hard up against the wall as you could possibly get, and this side is lifted up, so you kind of feather it like that. And that's really the only technique that is needed for this. But it does take a little bit of practice, so don't get frustrated, just keep going. The mud takes a while to dry, so you have, 15 minutes of working time, and that's plenty for a small spot like this. All right, so I let this set up overnight. I got lazy, I didn't do it last night, but it's now dry, solid, and ready for sanding. And if you ever feel discouraged because you watched a YouTube tutorial and they make it look easy, or it almost doesn't even seem like it needs sanded, what they never do on camera is cross-light the patch to show you all the imperfections, all the lines and valleys. So this is what I'm working with here. So there's lines, there's scrapes, there's valleys that need filled, there's another line, there's bubbles. So there's a lot of things here that the camera doesn't always pick up, but rest assured it is there, so that's why we just keep layering it up, sanding, layering, sanding, and eventually it'll look really good. So I'm gonna get started on the sanding. Really wanna make sure this part here is well gradiated, where you can't really tell where the drywall ends and the joint compound begins. So that'll show up after you paint. You'll still see these little scale marks, and so just make sure those are sanded just as smooth as the inside. All right, so I'm trying to do this whole room, and this is just a little patch. So it's gonna be a while till I paint, but there's still a couple little spots that I wanna cover. So just gonna throw a little bit on there. All right guys, so this is your basic wall patch. This works on a lot of different applications. Once these little patches dry, it shouldn't take long since it's a really thin layer. This is ready for paint. I still have a lot of drywall work to do in this room, so it's gonna be a while till I actually paint, but this is it. So thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and if you have any questions, leave them in the comments below. I'll do my best to get back to you. Thanks.